Today on Tricrow Studios, we do a high gain amp shootout between the Peavey 6505 Plus and the orange Rockerverb 100 Mark III. Now, I would like to reiterate here, this is a high gain amp shootout only. That's why it's titled so. So you're not going to hear any cleans or any breakup. This is just high gain geared towards metal. I also made the decision to boost both amps with an Ibanez TS9. You wouldn't generally do that with the 6505 Plus. However, I've been really enjoying it lately. But I do feel that to get it outside of that rock territory and more into high gain and sort of metal for the Rockerverb, you really do need a boost. But I do have two sound samples for you today, the first of which is in drop C, and that's a more balanced type EQ setting, whereas the second of which is a little bit more on the scoop side, and that's in drop B. All right, so there you go. There are the two sound samples for the high gain amp shootout between the Peavey 6505 Plus and the orange Rockerverb 100 Mark III. Now, I usually do get asked for the 6505 Plus, what version is that? It's the made in USA version. They moved everything over to China. I believe they still continue that with the 6505 too. I don't think there's any different components or anything for the 6505 Plus from USA to China, so but I just who cares? It is at this point in the video where I do like to go over kind of what I've gained from doing a shootout like this, and it's one of those things where owning both amps for a little bit of a time, at least like 2 years or so. The 6505 Plus, it just has that low mid focus and that really good grunt and growl to it, where the Rockerverb itself, you can dime everything on it and it sounds great. I don't generally do that. I did not do that here. I was actually a little more reserved than I normally was or normally am with the low end on it. But the Rockerverb has a little bit more focus on the overall mid and the high end. And you can definitely dial in a lot of focus with the low end, although sometimes it can get a little flubby. But the 6505 Plus, with that focus on the mid-range and that lower and low-end mid-range, there's not a ton of focus on the high end, so sometimes you do have to, and I generally do, skew my EQ a little more in the high frequencies. And just as I said in my 6505 Plus versus Mark V shootout, both of these amps can be sort of considered like standards for high gain amps. The Rockerverb, I don't know why, it doesn't have the best reputation. Those who use it love it. But a lot of people do tend to shy away from it. I don't know if it's just a misunderstood amp, because it does have a lot more focus on like rock type tones versus high gain. But just like a JCM 800, that's not a high gain amp. Throw a boost in front of it, get the volume up, and then it is sort of a high gain amp, but it's best paired with other amps. And the 6505 Plus or 5150, whatever you want to call them, those have just been classic amps since they came out in the 90s. They're just great amps, and you can usually get them for a very fair price on the used market, and they're fairly easy to come by generally. So both amps are great choices for you, whether you want to spend a little extra money and get a Rockerverb. I know maybe it's a little more than a little bit of extra money, or you do want to go a little bit more, not cheaper, because it's not really a cheap amp, especially new, but a little more fair on your wallet, and grab the 6505 Plus. I don't think you'll really be disappointed in either amp. But as in any video that I do with Peavey amps, I do have to mention, if you're looking to pick up one on the used market, do yourself a big favor, grab a can of contact cleaner and set aside about a half hour's worth of your time with some screwdrivers. I have not had this issue happen on my 6505 Plus, but I have 4 other Peavey amps, and I've had to do that to all of them within the first year of owning it. So what happens is, with Peavey amps, the potentiometers, the contacts in the potentiometers get dirtier faster than other amps. Not sure why. So that's generally when you're going to hear that little bit of crackling when you're moving around your knobs. However, what does happen, and unfortunately happened to me with my JSX, if it happens to your volume controls or your gain controls, it can actually cut out, and it can actually seem like you're losing power. So what happened with the JSX there for me was was on the gain knob. So whenever I would change the gain, if it wasn't in that certain sweet spot, sometimes it would just sound like the amp was cutting out, or other times it would work perfectly fine, and then about 30 seconds or 45 seconds later, it would just start to go for power, and then it would start to come back in, so not really usable. all that has to be done there, you pull the chassis out and you just spray all the potentiometers and wiggle in to make sure that everything's kind of moving around there, and it cleans everything. And then your amp's just perfectly good and good as new. And you really have to do that maybe once every 1.5 to 2 years. But that's all I really have to say. I know some Peavey owners hate me, but I own 5 Peavey amps. I've done it to 4. It's a well-known issue. They're still great amps. But again, that is all I really want to say here. Had a lot of fun doing this shootout. I'm very lucky to own both of these amps and, of course, all the gear that I do own. But that's all I want to say. Thanks for watching.